Every year for the past 5 years, I've been taking students from Iowa to go to a remote part of India. And this last winter, we also went as a team on a research grant. So several colleagues of mine went as well. Um, and the part of India that we go to is the state of Rajasthan, which is indicated in red over there. And in Rajasthan, we work in an area called Mewad, which I've circled. It's around the city of Udaipur, which is really an awesome city and a great place to visit. So if you take a look at the state of Rajasthan, you'll see that half of the state is desert, the yellow part, and the other half is plains. And these plains go off up to the Himalayas, and actually the desert goes off up into Africa and turns into the Sahara Desert. And what stops the desert from taking over the rest of the plains are these ancient hills called the Aravali Hills. And on these hills used to be full of the densest jungles you can imagine, as pictured in Kipling's Jungle Book. But over the past 50 years, the forests have been depleted, and they're sort of rapidly disappearing, as you can see in those two images. Wherever there was dense green, now there are these gray patches, which is barren lands. To get a picture of this, when you go there, you see these hills that are still somewhat covered with forests. And then when you look the other way at the hills that are denuded, that's the picture that you get. So when I went there, I wondered why this happened in the last 50 years or so. And the answers are very, very varied. But the main reasons for it are as follows. The forest is fuel. And to see this, you have to walk through the day of a woman in the village of Karich that borders the forest. So the ladies wake up, and this is their first task of the day, is to prepare the morning meal. And then they set off together as a group. They gather together, and they depart for the daily fuel collection. An hour and a half of harvesting wood in the forest. The wood is tied up and loaded up. And then they walk over the hills back again through this terrain for 2 hours. In the summer, it can be really hot out here. It can get up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And they walk across hills that in the past used to be covered with forest from which they could actually get their wood. And so they come back home at about 3:30 p.m. Those huge bundles of wood there each weigh about 70 pounds, about 10 feet tall, and I couldn't budge those bundles of wood, but these women have carried it over the hills for a couple hours. And then, of course, when they return home, they make the evening meal. The meal is cooked over this thing called the three-stone hearth, which is ubiquitous all over India and Africa, and they cook with the wood that they just harvested. You can see the black patch of soot in the back. That's something that we will see in a typical home. Every time you blink, think about this: one woman or child has suffered from the complications of cooking fire smoke. 4 million of them die each year from smoke inhalation effects. So their lungs are really terribly afflicted, and this is not an India problem. 3 billion people around the world face the same problem on a daily basis. The other way in which this connects to lungs is that the forests that are disappearing are the Earth's lungs. They clean the air, they sequester carbon. Without the forests, the effects of climate change would be far more severe than they are today. So, in effect, by preventing deforestation, we would be saving the women's lungs as well as Earth's lungs. The second reason is forest is food. We work with a very excellent organization in Rajasthan. They are a non-profit called FES, Foundation for Ecological Security. And FES has been working with the villagers for the past decade or so, and they have tried to educate the people on deforestation issues and really working with them to try to preserve the forest. And FES was founded by the National Dairy Development Board, and you might wonder what the National Dairy Development Board has to do with forests. If you take a close look at those hills that I showed earlier that are completely bare of any foliage, what you will observe is that there is no underbrush. Everything has disappeared. And they've disappeared because of the ever-present Indian cow, which is free range and can roam everywhere and eat all the underbrush. So it's basically turned into fodder for the cows. India is global bovine density central. There are 300 million of them in India, and they eat everything. The cows are holy in India, as many of you may know, and they are worshipped. But they live a very long life, and throughout their 20-odd years of existence, they eat all the forest that exists, so one could say that free-range cows milk the forest. The cows are holy, but their cousins, the buffaloes, are not. So they suffer the fate of being slaughtered for beef. And India, I don't know how many of you know this, but India is one of the leading exporters of beef to the world, which doesn't square very well with our image of the cow being holy in India. The third form of attack recently has come from goats. So Rajasthan now is the number one exporter of goat meat, particularly to the Middle East, where the demand has increased. And so this skyrocketing demand for mutton has added another sort of nail to the coffin to the forests in Rajasthan. So when the humans, the cows, and the goats are done, the forest is stripped bare. So how do we solve a problem like this? There are lots of complex things that are involved in this problem. There are issues of women's rights, there are issues of caste disparities, economic strife, and of course the ecological problem. And to untangle this web, one has to think of creative ways of solving the problem. FES, which is the organization I mentioned before, has been really active in persuading the villagers to try to stem this loss of forest. In fact, FES has worked with them to try to cordon off a 250-acre area, and they asked the villagers to stop cutting the trees in that area and to stop grazing their livestock. So in 2004, the area that was cordoned off looked like this, and in 2008, it looked like that. So the forests can come back, but this is just a small piece of land. We are looking at a much, much larger area that is afflicted with deforestation. So as an engineer, you think, is there anything in this area that is abundant? And can we use that as a lever to pry this problem open? And so based on this thought process, a friend of mine, Sailesh Rao from Climate Healers, got together with FES, and they observed that Rajasthan happens to be in a region of very, very strong solar flux. So they have a lot of solar energy. So the idea was to take this further and give the villagers solar cookers on which they could cook their meal. The villagers basically cook these thick flatbreads. So you need very high temperatures to cook these breads. And so they designed the solar cooker. It could actually produce as much heat as they wanted and enable them to cook. So they gave this to the villagers for free, essentially, hoping that they would adopt it. Unfortunately, the design failed, and the villagers basically didn't use it after 6 months. There were lots of reasons for it, but the primary reason was that the design was not adapted to the villagers' lifestyle. The women, when they cook, they're managing a lot of things. They're managing their infants, they're holding on to them while they're cooking, and they're usually cooking inside the house. They're also cooking sitting down, holding their children. And they cook in the early morning and in the evening hours when the sun is not out. So the design that I previously showed you of the solar cooker just does not work for them. So when I came back a couple of years from Rajasthan, I posed myself the challenge of designing a solar cooker that you could cook at night with. So we worked on this concept. So it's basically having a solar collector which collects the heat, and then it puts that into a storage battery, a thermal storage battery, and then you release the heat when you need it in order to cook on the cooking surface. So we worked on this idea based on on observations in the village and making sure that we were going to construct this so the villagers themselves could actually build it. So no moving parts, so it doesn't break down, no electricity, and no exotic materials that the villagers could get locally. And I put a price point on it of $250. It just seemed like a reasonable price. So we went ahead and built this in our senior design project class. And that's the design that I'm showing you here. It was a gorilla, it weighed 800 pounds, and ended up costing $500. Since then, we've improved the design, but the price point still doesn't seem to be budging very much below $500. And this was a cause of concern for me. So when we went to Rajasthan this year, the thing that was in my mind was, what is the price point? What is reasonable for this particular design? What will take in the villages? So we took these cook stoves called the high-efficiency cook stoves, which are very popular in Africa but haven't caught on in India. These cost about $30, and they're a halfway measure, because what the high-efficiency cook stoves do is they cut down wood usage by half. Right? So it's a halfway step between their three-stone hearth and the solar cookers. And we gave it to several homes in the village. They cooked for about 3 weeks with this one, and we then sought input from the villagers. And we asked them how much they would be willing to pay for this high-efficiency cook stove, and they said, oh, about $10. So even the high-efficiency cook stove is way overpriced for the villagers, and that probably accounts for the fact that there are no high-efficiency cook stoves in the market in Rajasthan. So it struck us that the reason why this price point was so low was that they were comparing it to their normal apparatus, which is a three-stone hearth, which costs $0. So it occurred to us that that is the price point. So that's our competition. And you can imagine that this was very devastating for us. We've been spending years developing this $250 price point device, and we find out that the price point is actually nothing. Okay, so my friend and I, Sailesh, who I've been working with on this project, we were sitting there in one of the houses, Lachibai's house. We were watching her load the three-stone hearth with wood, and she kept putting wood in. And as she was cooking for a longer duration, the amount of wood was increasing. And Sailesh and I looked at each other, and we said, this three-stone hearth has a serious airflow problem. So as you load the wood on, the embers and the ash collect, and it keeps building up, and you put more wood in there, and eventually the airflow to the wood gets choked off, and so you have to put more and more wood on it. So we said, what? This is not how about designing the three-stone hearth, or redesigning it something in a three-stone hearth that can actually improve its efficiency through improving airflow? So we, based on this idea, the next day we were in the market in Udaipur and walking around, and we saw these plates, metal plates, scrap metal with 1-inch holes in it. And we said, if we could actually bend it in a shape that would encourage airflow and let the embers and ash drop from the wood, we could actually see if there's a fix to this three-stone hearth. So we went to this shop, bought this scrap metal. It cost next to nothing. We got a woman who was sitting by the side of the road who happened to be a metal worker. We asked her to bend it into this shape. We took this shape, put it in the three-stone hearths in the village, and these are sort of the preliminary results with this hearth implant, as we called it. So wood use, that's the traditional three-stone hearth, which costs $0. That's the high-efficiency cook stove. It does indeed cut down wood usage by 50% and costs $30. That is our solar cooker. You will still have some wood usage because in the rainy season, the sun doesn't come out as strongly, and so you will have to use some wood to supplement. And that's the $1 hearth implant. So the $1 hearth implant actually cut down wood usage even beyond the $30 high-efficiency cook stove in the tests that we did in the village. So we're very proud of this, of course, because now we have a device. It's just $1. You stick it in the three-stone hearth, and there you go, and you get good efficiency. We said, well, you could do this in millions of homes, make a serious dent in the wood usage, probably around the world. And so we were feeling very kicked about it. My parents have been watching me do this project for several years. They come and visit me when I'm in Rajasthan. And so I told them this is what we came up with, and we were very proud of it. And this is what my mom had to say about that. So, like everything our parents say, there's a kernel of truth in this. We were struggling with these advanced concepts of building a cook stove, a solar cook stove, storing the energy, and it got to be a research problem, and it needed my PhD skills to solve that problem. But it turns out that when we went to the village, we actually observed and looked at what these women needed and saw the problem with their eyes in a fresh way, dropping our PhD advanced degree training to the side, that is when I think we came up with a solution to the problem that might actually make a difference to their lungs. Thank you.